The Zhengzhou metro flood disaster. Swim skills required. Hello, kiddies. Welcome to Horror Funk Town. Quick question. How many people can you trap in a subway in China? 1, 2, 10? No idea. If you said 500, you are right. Yes, welcome. This is Horror Funk Town. And lucky for you, you are in not watching this video from a subway in China. Let's start. A routine subway ride home on July 20th, 2021 turned into a harrowing ordeal for over 500 passengers in Zhengzhou, China, when their train became trapped in a rapidly flooding tunnel. The water rose quickly, transforming the subway carriages into death traps, leaving the passengers to confront the terrifying reality that their lives were hanging by a thread. The tragedy raised urgent questions about urban infrastructure, emergency preparedness, and the consequences of climate change, as well as the human errors that compounded the disaster. The prelude to disaster. In July 2021, Zhengzhou, the capital of Henan province, experienced an unprecedented deluge that would later be described as a once-in-a-thousand-year event. Over 3 days, the city received more than 23 inches of rainfall, an amount equivalent to nearly an entire year's worth of rain. The torrential downpour overwhelmed the city's drainage systems and turned the streets into raging rivers. The flooding was so severe that cars were swept away, homes were inundated, and thousands of people were stranded. On the afternoon of July 20th, the Zhengzhou Meteorological Bureau issued the highest level of rain warnings, urging residents to stay indoors and avoid unnecessary travel. However, the city's public transportation, including its subway system, continued to operate. The decision to keep the subway running would soon prove to be a catastrophic mistake. The flooding of Line 5. Among the subway lines still operational was Line 5, the busiest line in the Zhengzhou metro system, responsible for carrying more than 30% of the city's subway passengers. Train number 0501 was traveling along Line 5 that day, making its way from Jingkai Center Square Station towards Shakulu Station. It was a routine trip, but the situation was anything but ordinary. Outside, the rain continued to fall in torrents, and the city streets were already submerged. At around 5 p.m., the train was suddenly brought to a halt by the emergency brake system. The cause of the stop was unclear, but after a brief pause, the train resumed its journey. Moments later, as the train approached Shakulu Station, the emergency brake system was triggered again, this time for a much graver reason. Unbeknownst to the passengers, water had begun to flood the tracks. The train operator attempted to reverse the train back to Haitansi Station, but after moving only a short distance, the train came to a stop once more. The situation quickly spiraled out of control as water from a nearby burst retaining wall began to pour into the tunnel, rapidly rising around the trapped train. A nightmare unfolds. By 6 p.m., the water had reached the ankles of the passengers in the last carriage. Panic began to spread as the water continued to rise, reaching their knees, then their waists. The subway carriages, once a symbol of safety and modernity, had become a nightmare. Trapped in the dark, waterlogged tunnel, with no means of escape, the passengers were left to confront the very real possibility that they might drown. As the minutes ticked by, the water continued to rise, eventually reaching the necks of the passengers. The power inside the train went out, plunging the carriages into darkness, with only the eerie blue glow of emergency lights to illuminate the scene. Desperation set in, and passengers began making frantic calls to emergency services, as well as sending farewell messages to their loved ones. The subway train was now completely surrounded by water, with the carriages partially submerged. The air inside the train grew increasingly thin, and passengers began to show signs of hypoxia, struggling to breathe as the oxygen levels dropped. In their desperation, some passengers attempted to break the windows to escape, but they were met with the terrifying realization that opening the windows would cause the train to flood completely. A ray of hope. Just when all hope seemed lost, the floodwaters began to stabilize, halting their rise. The pressure from the water caused the train to tilt slightly, raising one side of the carriages above the waterline. Passengers quickly realized that they could break the windows on the elevated side to allow fresh air into the train. Nearly 4 hours after the train had first come to a halt, rescue workers finally arrived. The sound of footsteps on the roof of the train brought a wave of relief to the terrified passengers. Rescuers handed tools to the passengers, allowing them to break more windows and improve ventilation. One by one, the passengers were evacuated, with pregnant women and children being the first to be rescued. The rescue operation was grueling and fraught with danger. The narrow emergency walkways were now partially submerged, and the fast-flowing water posed a constant threat. Rescue workers had to push, pull, and carry passengers to safety, guiding them through the treacherous waters to the nearest station. Despite the immense challenges, the majority of the passengers were successfully evacuated, though the ordeal left many with severe physical and psychological trauma. The aftermath and the search for accountability. The aftermath of the Zhengzhou subway disaster was marked by public outrage and demands for accountability. In the days following the incident, it became clear that a series of systemic failures and human errors had contributed to the tragedy. One of the most glaring oversights was the failure of city officials to respond adequately to the weather warnings issued by the Zhengzhou Meteorological Bureau. Despite receiving multiple alerts about the severity of the storm, the city's leadership did not take the necessary precautions to protect its citizens. The decision to keep the subway system running, even as the city was being submerged, was a critical error. Furthermore, the investigation revealed that the retaining wall at the Wulongkou parking lot, which had collapsed and allowed water to flood the subway tunnel, was poorly constructed and not designed to withstand such extreme conditions. The drainage systems in the area were also found to be inadequate, having been narrowed during a road expansion project, which reduced their capacity to handle excess rainfall. The emergency response to the disaster was also heavily criticized. The delay in reporting the flooding to the main office and the slow deployment of rescue teams meant that passengers were left trapped in the flooding subway for hours before help arrived. In the end, 14 people lost their lives in the subway, while the broader flooding disaster in Zhengzhou claimed the lives of 302 people, with 50 more still missing. The human cost of negligence. The Zhengzhou metro flood disaster serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of negligence and poor planning. The lives lost in the subway that day were not just numbers, they were people with families, dreams, and futures that were tragically cut short. The disaster also highlighted the broader vulnerabilities in urban infrastructure, especially in the face of increasingly frequent and severe weather events driven by climate change. In response to the disaster, the Chinese government launched a nationwide inspection of subway systems, focusing on their preparedness for extreme weather events. Several officials, including the mayor of Zhengzhou and other top city authorities, were disciplined or removed from their positions for their roles in the disaster. However, for the families of the victims, these measures were cold comfort in the face of their unimaginable loss. Conclusion: a warning to the world. The Zhengzhou metro flood disaster is a chilling example of what can happen when complacency, negligence, and a lack of preparedness collide with the forces of nature. It is a stark warning to cities around the world about the importance of investing in resilient infrastructure, robust emergency response systems, omniscient proactive disaster planning. As climate change continues to intensify, the lessons learned from Zhengzhou must not be forgotten, lest we see similar tragedies unfold elsewhere. And to all our viewers, if you found this story gripping, don't forget to check out more real-life horror stories on Horror Funk Town. From chilling tales of survival to catastrophic disasters, we bring you the darkest and most mysterious stories from around the world. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode.